Hello, this is Colm Gibney. I apologize for not making any new videos lately. I've been up to my eyes. I guess I'm a victim of the slave system. So, like I said, I apologize, and I've been meaning to get some content out. I normally try to plan my videos, but this one is going to be very much on the fly. So let's get rolling. First thing I would like to say is please come over and have a look at the forum at starforts.org. starforts.org/forum. You're more than welcome. There's plenty of good discussions going on, plenty of good information to be found, lots of new places to be seen, and photographs, videos, all kinds of things happening here. So your presence would be very welcome. So here's the thing I've been meaning to get out for a while. Like I say, I just haven't had the chance. In my time looking at and looking for Starforts, I've started to recognize certain common patterns with towns and town layouts. One can always find the oldest part of an old town very quickly, visually, and it goes like this. Here we are. This is Prague, from Prague in the Czech Republic, from a long distance out. As we go in, you can always find the heart of the old city pretty much straight away because of the layout of the streets. The street pattern, I've noticed, comes in 5 distinct chronological patterns. There are some other variations, but the general case is this. The first type, and the oldest, is a grid of undulating, often curvy lines that make up quite a natural looking formation, quite cellular in its appearance, and can be found in nature as here. This, I'm not sure exactly where it is. I have a feeling it's China, but you can see how these lines are formed, making up little cells. Here, for example, on the back of a fig leaf, you see the same pattern. Here again on the back of your, well, not your finger, my finger, a similar pattern. This is the general idea. here we see how the streets are laid out in little cells, also around the oldest part of the town. As you move out from the centre, these cells become more regular in their appearance. The curved lines tend to straighten out. The general look is like this. After that, you will see a quite familiar grid of squares and rectangles. The next stage is this, where you have a superimposed geometric lines, big circles, big roundabouts, big ovals coming into the city plan. Washington is probably the best example of this kind of pattern. As I say, I believe this is overlaid on the previous street layout. And the last more modern type that we see is what is known as tract constructions, and these, I believe, actually follow natural lines such as the wow lines in Russia and in the Ukraine and many other places. I believe these are the foundations that we use to build our towns. So, to show you the example again, this is Prague. You will find this all over the place. Even in American cities, you will still see the older part of the town will have this appearance. This can be overbuilt and may dissolve somewhat, but it is generally there. So as you see, as we move out, we're going from our nice natural cellular formation into these angular forms. As we move out again, much more regular squares, rectangles, and further out again you will see how the layout is on tracts. They might not always be straight, but this is general example. I would think if we move out here, you will see it again, obviously much later developments. Now, when you do go back to the center of towns, This is where you're going to find the oldest, most historical buildings. They're always going to be in here. I could safely guarantee that you're not going to find any 2nd century, 10th century, 12th century, 15th century buildings out here in this pattern. This will be later. I really don't know what to make of the timeline, but say approximately 19th century for this, depending on who you believe, but you're not going to find 17th, 15th century buildings out here. Let me give another example here. This is the city of Vienna. The oldest part of the city. Has a curvy cellular formations. This is where you're going to find the oldest buildings. As you move out just a bit, you're going to find later constructions. The pattern changes to type 2, type 3. Should find an example of type 4 being these superimposed, that is to say, later additions of straight lines, circles, diagonals, big roundabouts. It's very hard to put this into, put dates on this exactly, but it is most definitely the general rule. Now, the one of the points about this, and this is where it relates to star formations, is if we go, for example, here to Lucca in Italy, or Lucca, I'm not, my Italian pronunciation is not that great. You can clearly see the oldest part of the town has been established inside what is clearly a star, and they've crammed as much in as they could, and it gradually grew until they couldn't stay within the limits of the star, and the rest of the town formed around the outside. Another example, let me try one here. Here we are in Saint-Tropez in France. Have a look at the overall view. Okay, this is the oldest part of the town. It will always be in or around the star, depending on, I believe it was accessibility. For example, if we go to Valletta in Malta, which is one of the most spectacular stars out there, the assumption might be that this is where the old part of the town was established. I would strongly disagree. I think that when they were building here, they couldn't actually get into this because the star couldn't be breached. They couldn't get in to build, and you will find that the older parts of the older buildings will have been established in other areas where they could get in. Now, the important thing about this, for example, if we go to Palmanova, excuse me, a lot of people will assume that this town was built at the same time as the star was built. And that's what they'd like to have you believe. What I believe is that this town was built, this star was here, and when they had the need for a town, they built it. It's clearly been planned to fit into this. I believe this star was vacant because it's in a very rural area. There's not much going on. And when they did decide to set up a military base or something, they just moved into the star, sat down with a drawing board and a ruler and pen and pencil, and planned this layout and put it in. But this is a later addition. Now, even with the type, the oldest type of stars, layout, I'm just going to float around here because, as I said, this is sort of on the fly, and let's see what we can find. Here again, this is Zurich in Switzerland. You can see how and where the oldest part of the city is. As the city grew, the street pattern changes, and if we overlay the star, you can see that the oldest part was established within the star along the banks of the river. The town, remember that the town would not have been this size at the time. It would have been much smaller. It would have been only the size of the older layout, so this star easily accommodated the town. They probably would have had fields and market gardens around. And as the town grew, so the pattern changes. We'll try somewhere else. Kind of isolated there, kind of small. We go to where we go to Geneva in Switzerland. Now, this is the old town of Geneva. It's clear to see. Check it out. This is where the older buildings will be. When you start to get outside, this is where the Geneva star was, quite clearly. The later town grew up around and eventually over the star. So if we go to I'll give you another example. Nope, that's not it. Forgive me. Oh, yeah. So this isn't doing what I wanted to do. Excuse me. I'll get us there eventually. So if we have a look at Saint Martin. On the Ile de Ré in France, you can clearly see, even within a small town like this, the town started, the construction, the establishment of the town started here around the harbour and gradually moved out. So the star was, I'll just change that because that annoys me. This is Google censorship because this is a prison and probably government buildings, and they don't like people to see those, so we'll just turn back go back to some earlier imagery. That should give us a clearer view. So the town would have settled, it would have established here around the harbour, this corner of this star. And as the town grew, it grew outwards from here and gradually filled the star. Now, this is a very important point. And it can be seen repeated everywhere. The old town, smaller buildings, tight-knit, cramming itself in for its protection and then later growing to the outside. If we go back to Vienna, and I'll show you where the Vienna star was. So here it was. Oh dear. Sorry, something has happened here. This map is not in the same position. This is the problem where you move your mouse around. You want to move the map, the image. You end up moving the map. It would have been here-ish. So this is Vienna in 1739, according to the map. And sure enough, that's where the oldest part of the town was. There was big demand for space, so they crammed as much as they could into the star for their protection, because the star was offering them protection. And where all the points were and have now been covered up has later buildings, some magnificent buildings which is very interesting because it doesn't gel with everybody's idea. If we go to street views and have a look at these buildings, they are absolutely stunning, breathtaking in their scale and their detail. You see more in the background here. And here, this is in the background, well worth a view. We'll have a look at it now. It's the town hall. I'm going to go here because I believe there was a Christmas market on at the time, so it's a bit crowded. Now, a lot of people think that these buildings are ancient, but they're not as ancient as the stars, because where these magnificent buildings are built, again, let me show you. That map slipped again, did it? I'll have to get approximately here. All these beautiful buildings are built on where the points of the star were. So there is physical evidence that can provide us with not with dates, but with an approximation of when things were built. Certainly in order as to when things were built. All these buildings in here, their foundations were originally laid down before all the buildings outside here. It's only logical. So when you do go in here and have a look at some of the buildings, you will see a lot of modern facades, but they are just the facades. The foundations of these buildings date way back before the opera houses, museums, town halls, the magnificent architecture that people are asking so many questions about. So that's sort of the bones of what I'm saying. Like that, I'm winging it here, and I hope that my point is coming across and clear. That this pattern is the oldest street foundation pattern that we have. It changed from being a nice cellular natural kind of layout to being this layout, which, if you notice, has no circular features. It has hardly any right angles. Likewise for the type 1. If there are right angles, they're purely incidental. Then the ruler and then the right angles appeared. After that, it seemed this is the first sign of the compass, and then the last is the tract, which you can see further out here again. These parallel rows of houses, buildings, factories, even with terrain that's fairly uneven, you will still get this later, these tracts. To give you, I mentioned Washington. Here's Washington, and you'll see what I mean by the big circles, diagonals, geometric straight edge forms, big ovals. So there we go. As I said, I'm winging it. I apologize if it's not coming across clearly. I hope that you get the point. And I just have so little time. I have to try and get what I want to say out. Perhaps we can look at this another time. On that note, I will leave you. Please keep your minds open. Keep thinking. Your thoughts all go into the collective consciousness, and together we'll crack this one wide open. Thank you very much.